add value to your business, or do you want to just be this administrative person?
And often if you look at your talent team and the caliber of talent in your company, they correlate.
You could hire the best person for the job if they were in your candidate pool.
All these individual employees, one by one, together, their voices all come together to articulate the culture of the company.
If you were trying to personalize something and get someone's attention, what you find on their resume, maybe what you found from a previous phone screen isn't going to cut it. You get yourself in trouble when you just hit send blindly.
More from Entelo's Director of Sales Development, Justin Gandelman, on the similarities between recruiting and sales development on this week's Hiring on All Cylinders. Welcome back, everyone. This is a new voice. You might not recognize it. My name is Sean Simmerly. I'm with the sales development team here at Entelo. I was also actually part of the podcast at HR Tech Bonanza that was last year in Chicago. And so I love the Hiring on All Cylinders team and family, and I'm excited to take a little part in a couple episodes and see how that goes. Today is even better because the guest that we have joining both myself and, of course, Amina Moinadine.
Amina value add Moinadine.
Okay,
Sean.
sorry, I can't
get
steal,
it right.
I can't steal all of Rob's lines. All right, but joining both me and Amina is my boss, Justin Gandelman. Justin, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Absolutely. I promise this will be about recruiting. I know that we have two sales development people now on the microphones over the airwaves, which is a little weird, but I promise it's going to connect to recruiting. So with that, Justin has a pretty unique background, and I'm just going to kind of have him jump into it and kind of explain what brought you to Entelo and how you came to be the Director of Sales Development here at Entelo.
Awesome. Well, thanks both of you for having me. So quick background on me, my story. So I was hired as a sales development rep as my first job out of college at the age of 21 with a company called Adobe, and was a sales development rep and then an AE and a senior AE over my 5-year term at Adobe. And then made sort of a career transition into sales development and was hired by a company called Hootsuite to build out a sales development team here in San Francisco prior to me joining Entelo about 2 years ago.
Okay, so the trend that I see there is building out a sales development team. Sounds like you've done that a couple times now.
Yeah, it's definitely what we've done over the last 2, 3, 4 years, and that's where my focus has been.
Okay, cool. So definitely going to want to talk about how you've done that, how you've been able to scale it. But before we do that, the overarching theme that I kind of want to cover today is that there are some serious similarities between recruiting and sales, especially sales development and kind of the top of the funnel activities that we'll see in sourcing and recruiting as well. So I guess actually I'm going to kind of just ask an overarching question to you, and I'm going to feel free to jump in and kind of ask some follow-up questions. But we hear that there are these similarities. Why do you think people draw that connection, and what do you see as being those similarities? Yeah,
I mean, I think sales development and sourcing in particular are almost the same thing, right? I think when recruiters or sales development people sort of reach out to their prospects or candidates, they are selling an opportunity, right? On the software side, it's an opportunity to optimize or make something more efficient or generally sort of improve a process. On the recruiting side, it's an opportunity for a new job, a career change, a chance to advance his or her development. And so I think those two things are fairly similar. And so sort of the logistics, the blocking and tackling of the job, outreach, research, getting to know a candidate before you reach out are very similar. Now, the end goal of sort of getting someone to an interview stage or an on-site versus getting a meeting or a demo or an in-person are sort of different. But I think the approach and how you interact with those folks are quite similar.
And so do you think the skill sets that you can glean out of both of those are pretty similar then?
Totally. I mean, we've interviewed and hired people who have recruiting and sourcing backgrounds for this role. I think at least in my 4 or 5 years of doing this, I can think of 5 or 6 people who have some sort of recruiting or sourcing background who have made really successful SDRs. It is all about the research, understanding your candidate, understanding what their maybe social footprint is or what they've done in their past. It's creating outreach that is going to be compelling for that person. And then it's sort of closing on a next step, right? So that's an interview, that's a conversation conversation that's a demo. Those things are about the same. And so we've had a lot of success doing that and think there are some pretty strong parallels.
You mentioned that a recruiting background is something that you've seen in SDRs before. What other qualities are you looking for when building out your SDR team?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I don't think there is a singular blueprint for a background of an SDR. I think there are sales leaders who want those sort of closers, the typical like salespeople that you would think of in a movie or maybe in technology 5 or 10 years ago. I'm a little bit different in my approach. I have 3 things that I typically look for when I interview, both background and in-person interviews. The first is a sustained work ethic, and that can be sort of identified through someone's college tenure and the jobs they had and the internships they've had. It can be done in sort of an in-person interview process where you're talking about projects or challenges or things they'd had to overcome, which would essentially be a proxy for hard work. But the ones that I really focus on that are different than sort of your typical salesperson, the first is creativity. So I'm a big proponent of this job actually firing more creative parts of your brain than selling parts of your brain, right? It's not necessarily a volume game anymore. It's about identifying something that is unique to that individual and then being able to tie that to a value that your product brings. And that takes someone that's a little bit more creative than sort of your like ABC closing, I'm a salesperson. And then the other piece is naturally being curious, right? And I think that does have parallels with an account executive, but being willing to ask that next level question, right? So someone responds to you and maybe isn't interested or has an objection, putting yourself in their shoes and asking why that could be, and being able to have a conversation on that same plane takes a level of curiosity. So you go out and figure out what that persona is and be able to have that conversation. And so those are the things we look for. But at the end of the day, SDR is an effort job, right? You can't make up for effort, but creativity, general curiosity, those things are really important.
And you and I have been working together for the last year and a half, and I've seen you build your team from, 5 or 6 people?
Yeah, so I inherited 4 folks when I started.
And now it's over 20?
Yeah, so I think we're exactly at 20, including me. So it's been pretty aggressive growth here over the last 18 months or so.
Yeah, it's been pretty exciting. And I will say Justin is an honorary recruiter here at Entelo.
I'm blushing, but yes.
How many interviews have you done here?
486.
Wow. I was looking at the numbers, and there are only a few other people at all of Entelo who have done more interviews than Justin. One thing I've heard you mention before is that the SDR role here is a very research-based role. And how do you really tie a research-based role into your interview process?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple elements, but the big one for us is we actually have an SDR do an assignment for a couple reasons. One is it allows us to assess that exact thing, research, writing skills, skills that are very transferable to the day-to-day job, and seeing what a person with, frankly, likely no SDR background can find online, can find through friends, colleagues that are current SDRs, to be able to put together a prospecting email and a follow-up voicemail. Those sorts of research elements are really important. It's also an opportunity for us to provide feedback and see how they take it. And so the woman who does this part of the interview in our process is our team lead, Maria. And one of the things that we focus on is her giving feedback that is applicable to the work they put forth and then how they receive that feedback. Because sales is a feedback-based job, right? You're going to get feedback from prospects just like recruiters, right? You're going to get feedback from your candidates, from the prospects you're reaching out to. And how you take that feedback and apply it is really important. And that actually sort of colors the research you do the next time, right? Is maybe finding a piece of information that is tangentially connected to what your value is, maybe isn't the right approach. How do you find that other thing? And we can assess that pretty well in a 45-minute conversation about a 5-sentence or 6-sentence homework assignment that we found to be a really good predictor of success in the SDR role here at Entelo.
Yeah, I think the homework assignment is really beneficial for this role. One thing I've noticed in the team that you've built here is it's a pretty diverse team. We have new grads, we have people who have had years of experience in making career changes, we have people who have a recruiting background. And so when you're evaluating this step in the process, how are you evaluating different types of backgrounds and different types of skill sets?
Yeah, I mean, for me, the background is almost insignificant. I don't think that if someone has sales experience or they don't, that sort of puts someone ahead of another person. I think this specific assignment and sort of the work that goes into it shows someone's, frankly, the effort they're willing to put in and how much they want the job. Because it's not as simple as like, I'm going to go write a paragraph, right? There's research. You have to find prospects. You probably have to lean on a friend or a colleague. They probably also give you some inside knowledge on what the job is to make sure you would like it. And then you have to come and sort of present it to a team of people. Those are all sales skills, right? It's selling, it's research, it's writing. So those things kind of come out in the assignment. But if someone was selling Verizon phones, for instance, or someone just graduated college, I'm not sure either of those give a person a leg up or not in this, right? It's about being able to take an assignment, think about it creatively, and put your best foot forward. And so we hope that's what that assesses. We do look for folks who are interested in a customer-facing career. The SDR job is hard, right? I mean, you've sourced for it, Amina. Sean has managed folks who are SDRs. This is not an easy job. So there needs to be a payoff at the end. And so I think in our initial screens, it's trying to figure out what your career development is and if this is on that same roadmap. And if it is, we have a really great training program and sustained success of people moving through the organization and graduating into roles pretty quickly. But those are more the type of things I look for on a resume or on a screen versus sort of sales experience or sort of sustained success in a particular role.
Yeah, it makes sense. And a lot of what you say is really similar to recruiting. Selling, research, writing. It's pretty much when I think about my job and when I'm doing the sourcing aspect of it, it's pretty much exactly what I'm doing, right? I'm doing research on all the companies that we may want to go after. I'm doing selling in my writing for my emails when I'm doing reach outs. So it is really interesting to see the parallel between recruiting and sales development.
And one of the reasons I took this job in the first place was beyond my own professional development and the team I was inheriting was I really understood this challenge in recruiting because I lived the challenge selling. Right? It's, sales development and recruiting are similar, especially when you go look back 5 or 10 years. Sales development was all about batch and blast. It was all about volume. It was all about, I have to make 50 calls and I have to send 1,000 emails. My first job at Adobe, you had to BCC an email box on every email you sent, and you got marked on your pay if you made enough calls, right? It was all about volume.
Wow.
Today, recruiting is moving to a quality over quantity approach, just like we preach at Entelo for our sales development, right? People are getting 100, 200, 300 recruiting emails in a given year, perhaps, same as a VP of HR, probably in a given month. And so that part is becoming ever important when people are being inundated with outreach to them from salespeople, recruiters, the like. And so that part I really understood. And so, one of the reasons that I thought this was an interesting opportunity.
Man, I think fewer either recruiter spam or sales spam, the better. I think we can all agree on that. But Amina, you were talking about, research, creativity, writing, and how that is leveraged in the recruiting, space, especially, someone that thinks about cutting through that white noise. Question, I guess, for both of you, but let's start with you, Justin, would be, tell me a little bit about some of the sources and, sites or kind of avenues that your team goes about and looks for information when doing that research.
Yeah. So obviously, when we're doing our sales outreach, you have your database in the recruiting world. It would be your ATS, right? That you can find information on. But if you were trying to personalize something and get someone's attention, what you find on their resume, maybe what you found from a previous phone screen isn't going to cut it. So our team uses a variety of sources. Twitter, what someone has sort of done socially is important. A lot of our folks look at the upcoming conferences that are happening and seeing if their prospects are attending or speaking or involved in any way. Simply doing a Google search of the person, the name, the person in the company brings up some interesting things that are in the news about them that you can talk about in your outreach. We've had folks that have created videos. We've had folks that have done a wide variety of things just to sort of put themselves above the noise and stand out in what is a fairly crowded inbox for a VP of recruiting or a director of sourcing, whatever it might be.
Yeah, for sure. And what about you, Amina? I mean, when you're going through and looking for information on candidates, how do you cut through the noise?
So I think I actually experienced this at Entelo where I did I experimented with the volumes game and then also the personalized approach. And the personalized approach has always been the approach that I like to take. And sometimes you can get bogged down and say, oh my God, I just need activity. Sometimes you just need to send a certain number of emails and you'll hopefully get a number of hits. But I have experienced that I would rather spend my time, send 30 personalized emails and really get somebody's attention versus sending 100. So when I'm looking at somebody's background, shameless plug, I am using Entelo, which has a lot of information on it. I really like to note the companies that they've worked at, maybe some of the awards that they've received. I think volunteering is something that's really important, especially because at Entelo, since I'm reaching out to these candidates to come and work at Entelo, we really value personal development, we value charity, we value volunteering, and it is actually something that has caught a lot of my candidates' attention is, wow, you guys match charity, you guys partner with different nonprofit organizations. And I think that I like to have a more casual approach when I'm sending an email as well. It's not, hey, this is my company, these are the reasons that you should talk to us, please get back to me. It's more of, hey, I saw your profile. I know you might not be looking for a new opportunity right now, but you've been working at this company. It's been really interesting what you've been doing. And even if the time isn't right for you to make a move, would you be open to chatting and learning a little bit more? And I've gotten so many kudos from candidates who've said, hey, you know what? I'm not looking right now, but I'm open to chatting because you took the time to send this note to me. And I've actually hired people because of that as well.
Nice.
Can I turn the podcast around and ask a question?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think one of the challenges that salespeople face sometimes is this sort of distinction between, like, I have to send out the number of emails because it's a numbers game and personalization. And so curious how you've seen that on the recruiting side, because you can't only send out 10 emails and hope 5 people reply, right? There is a numbers game element. And so curious how you sort of balance those things when you're recruiting for a bunch of roles, you're doing your own sourcing, but you also want to be very personalized. Like, how do you work through those?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it definitely is a numbers game, but also wanting to be personalized. So my approach typically is my first reach out's always going to be personalized. And that's where I'm spending most of my time, is crafting the right message, having the right subject line, having the right content in the email. And then I actually will reach out to somebody 4 to 5 times. And sometimes, people say, okay, I'll reach out only 2 or 3 times. I'm going to go all the way to 5. So the first reach out is personalized. Second or third is not necessarily personalized. And then when I get back to the 4th, I tie it back into my first email. I personalize it again. So the middle part is the numbers game where, okay, just blast everybody out with the second or third reach out, see if they want to talk. If they don't get back to you, send them another personalized response. And I have experience. I have had some people respond to me on my 4th reach out and be like, you know what, you're so persistent and you don't give up. Fine, let's chat. And I've gotten this tips from a couple of other recruiter friends as well, is getting creative in your last reach out. So what I've done before is say, hey, I know you might be busy, but pick a couple of these options. You're not interested, you don't want to chat with me at all. You want some vacation tips, I have them. You want to grab coffee, it's on me. Or don't reach out to me ever again. Wait. And then it gives them just a number and then they choose it.
So tell me, is number 4, you are being chased by a hippo and you need them to call animal control? Because I think every sales development rep at some point has said that line.
I haven't said that line, but it's somewhere typical with that. And I think that you probably see that more on the sales side than you do on the recruiting side. And I've gotten responses because I'm sourcing for salespeople, and I've gotten responses from salespeople who are like, clever, like it. Haven't seen this from recruiting, but see this from sales all of the time. Mm-hmm. So it's just trying to get their attention. It really is. And I think sales is similar to this, but recruiting, I feel like, is also just really about timing. And you might catch somebody on that very day where they had a bad day and they're open to hearing you out, or something happened with their manager, something happened with their company. So it's making sure you're constantly on top of it. And I've really learned, especially at Entelo, because I've done a lot more sourcing here than I have ever before, is you have to just continuously stay on top of it. And even if they don't respond, try again. If after the 5th time, try again 3 months later, and just stay on top of it. I actually have 2 candidates, one who just accepted our offer and another who's in final stages, who I had reached out to probably 6 or 7 times 6 months ago, 9 months ago, came back into pipe because they remembered all of our outreach.
So one of the things that we do on the sales side is very similar, right? Is we believe that timing plays maybe the most important element outreach. I wish we had this tool that told us when timing was right. Unfortunately, we don't, and so it is about
Ooh,
yes,
nice plug.
yes, very nice. And so it's about making sure that you're staying on top of your accounts. In your case, your candidates every 6 weeks, 12 weeks, whatever it might be, because you never know when that timing's going to come. But you want to make sure you're top of mind when it does come. And you can only do that by making sure you stay on top of that and you are doing your outreach. And you're trying to add value in some way, right? Not just the, hey, checking in, hey, following up, hey, touching base, right? It's the sending an article that you think might be interesting based on their background, or complimenting something that they wrote, that they posted to LinkedIn. All of those things help create sort of a brand of yourself and your company that is really important when that timing element does pop. You're right there ready to have that conversation.
I will say it's also interesting being a recruiter who has experienced a lot of rejection, has experienced a lot of silent treatment, that I was pretty bad about responding to any SDRs or any salespeople until
Shame
I
on
joined
you.
Entelo. I know.
I might have sent you some messages actually, thinking way back to it.
You definitely did. I got a lot of messages from Entelo, and I used to ignore all of them because I'm like, I don't have any time. I don't have enough time. And now that I've been so exposed to your team and to the sales team, and have really sat on the sales team and understood the pains that you guys go through, it's really changed my mentality. So to all you recruiters out there, respond to the SDR.
Yes.
It's a lot of hard work.
I'm sliding Amina $100, but I appreciate it.
Yeah, I mean, that's fantastic. Something that you just mentioned, actually, Amina, kind of made me think about this, but you were talking about, how sales has said, oh yeah, we used to do these, reply with the number that you think about, right? So almost like the methodology that sales has done, recruiting is kind of taking up now. And so actually kind of the pivot that I want to make is talking about innovation in sales and in technology in general. And I mean, if we think about it, email tracking with sales been around for 5, 6, 7 years now. And email tracking with recruiting really is, IntelliTrack was probably one of the first options out there for it. So I'm kind of curious, sales almost seems to kind of be a leading indicator as far as what's next for the recruiting space. So what innovations in sales get you excited about what potentially is next for recruiting and how that could be leveraged?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think the one that stands out to me is this idea of lead or account scoring. So really understanding where SDR should focus their time. And that can be for a variety of reasons. For us, we're selling to recruiters and recruiting teams. Those are things like how many recruiters someone has, or how many jobs are open, or how many jobs have recently been opened, or how many jobs have a technical background. Those are all indicators that they could probably find value in Entelo, and timing is correct. I think on the recruiting side, it's identifying folks who are ready to change a job, right? That is essentially lead scoring. Lead scoring is probably 7 or 8 years old now. We use it from an account perspective to make sure our SDRs are focusing on the organizations that have the highest likelihood of engaging with us and going through a sales process. That's the one that is big to me. I think the other one, which I'm not sure if it's going to catch on with recruiting, is video prospecting. So being able to sort of take a voicemail or a phone call, which isn't as prevalent on the recruiting side, but is on the sales development side, and turn it into a video. I keep hearing all of these things in tech. We're pivoting to video, right? That's sort of your way of moving from a content written-based platform to something else. And I think about, how many in-mails or how many emails I get from a prospecting perspective and how different video is. And I would just be curious if you would be comfortable, Amina, doing a quick 15, 30, 45-second video and sending it to a candidate. Do you think that would move the needle at all?
It's an interesting thought. I think you have to be really comfortable in front of a video. I don't think it's going to be everyone's cup of tea. My question about video also is, with email, I can quickly look at it on my phone. I can look at it on my computer. I could do it while I'm on the go and then mark it, okay, I need to respond to this. With video, if you're on BART, if you're on a bus, if you're in a car, you might not want to play it. That's something that goes through my mind. Or you need headphones. It's more of a particular scenario where I think email is a lot easier. But we went from phones back in the day to now email to, honestly, I even text my candidates nowadays. So wow. I don't know how much that is for SDRs and the sales side of things with prospects. But for me, I've gotten a lot more comfortable texting candidates and just talking to them through that means of communication. Video will be interesting. Video on the interviewing side is becoming more prevalent. Video on prospecting and sourcing emails, we'll see. I'm open to it.
Interesting.
The texting thing is interesting because Sean and I have talked about it a bunch, and our sales team uses it once you've developed a relationship. I always wonder sort of what is the barrier, or what does the relationship have to be to justify a text? Like if someone randomly texts me a prospecting thing, I probably would delete it and actually be fairly upset.
It'd be super uncomfortable for me.
Now, if someone has had a demo with me in person and they're running late and they send me text, that's different, right? So I actually think that that's interesting and probably maybe more of a sort of further down the relationship tool. But your point around being on public transportation and having it becomes a little bit of an inconvenience. But I do think there is some value, maybe not on the recruiting side yet, but I wouldn't be surprised if folks start using video as a different way to stand out from maybe their other recruiters in the same space as them.
Wow. Yeah, 100%. I do find it interesting that like I feel the buzzwords right now in the industry, machine learning, data science, all of those things. Sometimes it's just about the way you can actually connect with someone that's most important, right? The idea of video prospecting, the idea of text messages, and the fact that it's you can put as much creativity into the data science side of things, and that's super important. But if you can't connect with someone on a human level, does that matter?
I completely agree. My parents have been asking me this lately. They're like, one day robots are going to take over your job. How do you feel about that? And my answer to them is I just don't think that's going to be the case. I think that there will be certain aspects of recruiting that, yes, technology will help a lot, and it is already doing so, but having those phone conversations, having those in-person conversations, having those constant check-ins with my candidates, meeting them in person, showing them our office, and just looking at them face to face, it's just not something that a robot or a technology will ever be able to take over. And I feel like that's very similar with sales as well. And I'd love to hear your thought process on that, Justin. And I think that while we have moved into this inside sales methodology and everything's done over email and everything's done over the phone, and that's a lot more for the SDRs, what I hear from our AEs, especially on the enterprise side or the mid-market side, is there's just something different when they go in person and they meet with our customers. And I just don't think that will ever change.
I mean, the pendulum has swung so far. I mean, in society, but if you sort of boil it down to tech, is, everything is done via email or via phone, and rarely are there in-person interactions. I mean, we hire people who are just out of college, and you think sort of through their last 5-10 years, their real formative time, human in-person interactions, hard conversations, like that's not really the norm. I think the one thing that robotics or AI doesn't necessarily solve for is context. And it's hard to take sort of complex ideas. Someone is speaking at a conference and someone has written an article about this and someone has done this action, and take those three disparate things and create 3, 4, 5 sentences that tie into what you're providing as a salesperson or a recruiter, that I have a hard time figuring out if a robot will be able to do that. I think when you talk to your parents, you can give that example. But, for me, it's hard to sort of think of a machine or a software taking over completely sales development or recruiting. I think there's ways to actually help and optimize it. I think folks are just scared of oh my God, I won't have a job in 5 years and I'm going to call mom and dad and I'm going to have to go move back home and do all the things that me as a 31-year-old does not want to do. But I think there is some value add there. I just don't think it's a replacement.
Man. Absolutely. I mean, there are so many thought leaders, I think, in the sales space and in the recruiting space that have a lot of, cross-pollination. I mean, talking about context, right? Like Gary Vaynerchuk and John Barrows and all these people always talk about, content is king, but context is God. And that's, very relevant, right? The idea of actually having some semblance of understanding of a situation as opposed to just a piece of firmographic data that will make it seem personalized, right? And so that human touch, 100%.
And it would be great. And I think the challenge is not everyone is doing this, right? And I've read countless articles on LinkedIn from someone saying, how terrible an outreach was from an SDR or from a recruiter, mostly from SDRs, right? And I think the challenge is getting the industry to think about context and not about volume. You get yourself in trouble when you just hit send blindly because you don't know who's on the other end of that email, right? It's a name, it's a phone number, but you haven't spent the time to try and understand them, either by person, by persona, even by X person at a company that's interesting. And even if you do that, you're 80% ahead of the other SDRs and likely other recruiters with 30 seconds or a minute worth of just reading and understanding who this individual or company really is.
So you heard it here first. Recruiters, salespeople, you will not be out of a job because of AI. That human touch is important. But with that, frankly, I think we're past optimal length. I might have to cut this down now, but this has just been such an easy conversation that it's just kind of flowed. So thank you so much for joining, Justin. This has been an absolute pleasure. Amina, this has been fun for a first spin for me. I hope to do it again. All in all, I guess that's it. We'll sign off, and thanks so much.
Thank you.